exactly is the deal with Vox and the Vees? Are they as wholesome as evil can be, or is Vox using Valentino and Velvet as pawns for his own means? Today I'm doing a deep dive into the Vees, specifically Vox's relationship with them, to figure it out. To truly understand Vox's current relationship with the Vees, we have to first look back into the past. In life, we saw that Vincent turned on everyone he ever worked with. Some people say that he only killed to get job openings, but if you take a look at everyone that he killed in Brighter, there's the news anchor, the talk show host, 2 producers, 3 other TV personalities that we never see him take on the job of, and Bob, the head of the network. That's over half the kills that weren't trying to make a job opening for himself. And furthermore, it shows that everyone he ever worked with ended up dying. He had no reason to kill those producers. They were looking at him as though they had struck gold. But they had served their purpose, so he got rid of them. Then he did the same thing with Bob. The scene is literally framed so that the handshake sealing their deal turns into the hand throwing Bob off the roof, showing that that is what sealed his fate. Vincent saw everyone as a means to an end, and killed them the second they fulfilled their use. I also want to talk about the assortment of TV personalities that he killed. These weren't positions above Vincent, they were probably around equal standing, and we never see him taking on any of these other jobs. The picture on the newspaper that he hands to Bob towards the end of Brighter shows Vincent posing in the same set from the talk show, showing that that's still what he's doing. That means that these deaths aren't other instances of Vincent killing people to get their jobs, and it's unlikely that he killed them after he got something from them, because what would he have gotten from them when they're on the same level as him? That leaves that these were other stars in the network that Vincent was killing off because he didn't want to share the spotlight. And that isn't really surprising, since all throughout season 2, we see him struggling with sharing the spotlight. Trust me, my plan, my moments, all those instances where his narcissism shows through. So Vincent killed everyone that he worked closely with in life, and everyone who shared the spotlight with him. That's interesting, because the Vees fit into both of those categories. Now let's move on to the next chapter of Vox's life. Alistair. We know from things that Viv has said in interviews that Alistair was the first time that Vox really let down his walls and connected with someone. Unlike everyone that he was close to in life, Alistair wasn't a means to an end. Vox is a narcissist, we know this. And I think this was the first time that he met someone that he considered on his level, or maybe even above it. That's why he was so awestruck by Alistair. It was his first time looking up to someone other than himself. When you consider that, it's no wonder that he ended up falling for him, which we know that he did, because if you couldn't tell from all the blushing alone, Viv did say in a post on Blue Sky that Vox had a crush. So the one time that Vox wants to honestly partner with someone, not use them, not kill them off, and what happens? Alistair laughs in his face and tells him that they were never even friends. Not only are Vox's walls going back up after that, they're going to be reinforced. Alistair taught him a lesson. There are no friends in hell, and he's going to remember that forever. The one time he let himself be vulnerable and his heart got ripped out. So you can guarantee he is going to take every measure necessary to never care for anyone ever again. We even see the after effects of this in season 2, episode 6, when he quickly clarifies to Valentino that they are partners in business, because they can't be any more than that, because there are no friends, boyfriends, any kind of non-transactional relationship in hell, and he will not make that mistake again. But speaking of transactional relationships, why don't you go ahead and leave a like on this video, and maybe leave a comment telling me what other Hazbin Hotel theories you would like to see. I can info dump about these characters all day. Now let's take a look at the relationship between Vox and the other Vees in season 1. Our first introduction to Vox is him being obviously fake on a phone call with Velvet, his smile dropping the second she hangs up. Then he treats Valentino like an annoying obligation. I have a fire to put out upstairs, he says, sounding so done. His check-in with Velvet was very much the way a supervisor checks boxes. What's the problem? Where is he? Well, it looks like you have everything handled here. Good, I'm moving on to my next task. Then when he gets to Valentino, it's clear he doesn't want to be there. His fake smile is gone, but is replaced with annoyance, and almost immediately he pulls out his phone and starts ignoring Val, until the latter breaks his phone in frustration. Vox next turns to manipulation with an ease that says this is a method he's used on Valentino many times. Look at his smug little face as he turns away. He is so proud of himself. And then he immediately goes back to ignoring and only half listening to him. Of course, until a certain name is dropped. Throughout this episode, we see him treating both Valentino and Velvet as people he needs to manage, and at least with Velvet's, he carefully controls the parts of himself that she gets to see. Actually, he treats them like a cult leader would his followers. giving them just enough to feel important while ensuring that they stay in line. But in the finale, we see something different. We see Vox relaxed, with his walls down, broadcasting his full range of emotions, while in the room with both of his business partners. And then when he celebrates, they all appear genuinely fond of each other. So which is it? Well, let's move on to season 2. The first real scene we get of the Vees, Vox is once again managing them, telling them what they can and can't do. And it's no coincidence that this is the scene that he reveals he used to be a cult leader. His background is on full display, and I think this tidbit was included here so that the audience could clearly see what he was doing. A feeling I would love to share with the both of you. That is literally Cult Leader 101. This is for you! I want to share this enlightenment with you. And then he launches into a whole song to get them to buy into his vision, not telling them what it will do for them, but rather leading them to supply that themselves. Think of all your dreams that could come true. Imagine what it could enable. Because that's more powerful of a manipulation when the person thinks they reach that conclusion on their own. And we can see how effectively it worked at the end of the song. At the last line of Hazbin Guarantee, when Vox sings, "Trust me, just me," Valentino and Velvet get annoyed. But at the end of Once We Get Up There, Vox once again switches up the last line of the song to sing Once I Get Up There. And Valentino and Velvet now go along with it, jumping in with And I. Notably, the Vees portion of Hazbin Guarantee is titled Trust Us. It's not a coincidence that the two songs in this episode end with Vox changing the title to the singular. This juxtaposition shows the change in Valentino and Velvet, and shows them fully buying into his vision, at least for the time being. It's also very clear throughout the season that Vox looks down on the other Vees. There's the very fact that he feels like he has to manage them and keep them in line for one, but there's also more specific examples. When Valentino asserts that he has vision, Vox scoffs and says, "Yeah, sure you do." And then he belittles Velvet for being a new overlord. And while that could have just been for Carmilla's benefit, he doubles down on it once they get outside, saying that she screwed up the overlord meeting for him. All of this really shows that Vox is still focused on himself, that he sees Valentino and Velvet as a means to help him achieve his goals. And that was the case even before Alistair started manipulating him. There's a reason Alistair knew his manipulations would work. Alistair spends the season claiming that Valentino and Velvet are carrying the Vees. But we know that he's just saying that to make Vox feel insecure so that he pushes them aside and doesn't share his power with them and becomes the most powerful sinner in hell. During the fight in episode 4, we get a look at what he really thinks of their dynamic when he tells Vox to call off his goons. The fact that this statement is so not in line with the rest of his manipulations from the season, trying to make Vox feel less than the other Vees, shows that this is how he really sees them. Alistair knows Vox very well, and he definitely knew him well enough to know that his plan for Valentino and Velvet was to use them as pawns. And that's why he's so sure he can come between them. He doesn't need Vox to do a 180, he just needs to remind Vox of his original plan. And when I think about the future, we see that he succeeded. No more playing house once they're devout, I won't need a squad. If Alistair was starting from ground zero, I think he would have been able to sow discord and create a natural falling out. But I don't think he would have been able to create this cold calculation in Vox from nothing, this willingness to throw the other Vees aside. But he didn't need to create it, because it was always who Vox was. He did the same thing in life, and it was the same thing he plans to do with the Vees. He just needed a little push to get him back there. But Vox did need that push. He needed a reminding of his original plans, because I don't think he was as successful at avoiding attachment as he would like to believe. As we already touched on, we do see Vox letting his guard down with the other Vees. Those moments may be rarer, but that doesn't mean they're any less genuine, and he's protective of them. In episode 3 of season 2, Vox doesn't react at all when Vaggie points her spear at him, but when she moves it to Velvet, he immediately pushes it away. And then in episode 4, Alistair's first attack was aimed at Valentino and Velvet, but Vox jumped between them. These moments aren't part of the calculated persona that Vox puts on. They're instinct because he cares about the other Vees, regardless of what he might tell himself. I think one of the best illustrations of Vox's dynamic with the other Vees is Valentino's art vlog on the Vox Tech website. When Vox asks Valentino for his lunch order, he gets all annoyed that Val says he wants to go somewhere he doesn't. But the second Valentino says he just won't eat then, Vox immediately changes his tune to make sure he eats something, no matter the inconvenience to him. And then, despite all his complaints, he comes back with both the things Valentino had mentioned wanting. They'd settled on one thing, but he went out of his way to get both. This shows that while he may try to frame being attentive to Valentino's needs as just an obligation, just another person to manage, he truly does care. And I think it's safe to assume that that is the case with Velvet as well. The most logical explanation of all of this to me is that when Vox first made his alliance with the Vees, he'd planned for it to go the same way as his alliances in life. But by the very nature of hell being for eternity, things move slower. He has to rest in this partnership stage for longer, and that gives him time to actually develop these connections, to grow fond of Valentino and Velvet. Vox gets comfortable, and he forgets that they were never meant to be a permanent fixture in his afterlife. Until Alistair comes back into the picture, poking at all of Vox's insecurities, and he remembers he doesn't need the other Vees. They're just a means to an end. What I think will be super interesting is the evolution of Vox's mindset next season. He reached the end with the Vees. He tossed them aside, made it clear he was willing to kill them and that he only cared about himself. And yet, they stayed. They stood by him despite everything. I think it's going to take a little bit for that to sink in past all the pain that the finale left Vox in, but once it does, that's going to challenge his belief that there are no friends in hell. Because Vox has been brought down to his lowest. There is nothing Valentino and Velvet have to gain by keeping him around. Which means the reason they're keeping him around is because they actually care about him. And that is going to be mind-blowing to Vox. Once Vox realizes this, it's going to hit him really hard. And I think that will be the push he needs to finally admit that he does care for Valentino and Velvet. And I think it will also open the door for him to be genuinely happy and not measure everything based off his success. Because it will heal something in him for sure. But as for the question, does Vox actually care about the other Vees, or is he just using them? Yes. But he would just answer the latter. Okay, today I want to go through the sinners in Hazbin Hotel and try to determine what their chief sin was in life. This is something I've kind of been doing in my head for a little bit, and so I am going to do it in a tier list now, where I'm going to assign them to what their chief sin I believe was. And now, to be fair, they all show aspects of pretty much every single one of the sins, just like most people do. But it looks from season 2 like they're taking the approach of everyone has one chief sin that really got them into hell. So I'm trying to determine what that one chief sin is. And that's not saying they don't have the others in plenty. I did just grab a random character tier list off of Tiermaker and then redid the categories with all of the layers of hell. But there are characters here that aren't sinners. We're only going to be sorting the sinners because obviously, like, Fat Nuggets is a precious little boy who has never done anything wrong. So starting with Alistair, well, that's easy, done. He's in Pride. No, I am actually going to stop and talk about these, but Alistair's a really easy one. He is so prideful. He thinks he is all that and that no one measures up to him. And that's why what happens with Vox is so sad, because he felt like he finally found someone who was on his level. And then he ruined it. His own pride ruined it. Honestly. He is prideful to his own detriment. He thought he could take on Adam and he couldn't, obviously. Okay, I'm not turning this into a dissing Alistair video. He's prideful. He is one of the ones I am most certain of. Also, I think that's why he clashes with Lucifer so much. Because we have probably the most prideful sinner and the literal embodiment of pride himself. So, obviously, like, their pride can't fit in the same room without it being bruised. And, yeah, they just need to be kept far away from each other. Next up is Vox, another one that I feel like is pretty easy. I believe that he belongs in greed. Now, I have seen arguments made for envy for him because in Brighter, we see him looking at people holding these jobs that he wants and then going and killing them and taking their jobs. And that is a totally valid argument for envy. However, I look at him and I just see this mega CEO who's all about shelling out his products, and it just screams greed to me. I feel like everything is about growing his business, growing himself, and even with him killing other people to take their jobs, I feel like while there was an aspect of envy there for sure, I think it was more driven by his greed of him wanting to be on top, him wanting to be better. It's kind of like what Alistair said to him, you'll never be enough, you'll never fill your cup. He just has this hunger for more constantly. So I think it's actually his greed that is driving him. And next we have Valentino, who, I'm going to go ahead and say lust, cause, you should just look at him. Not like that. Ew, not like that. I'm not attracted to Valentino. I'm saying look at what he does. He's literally like the overlord of porn. Like, I could see an argument being made for Wrath because he does have a temper. However, I'm going to apply Occam's razor here that the simplest solution is the correct one. And his entire theming is around lust, like that is his job, that's what he does. I'm gonna say lust! And to complete the V's, we have Velvet, who I'm going to put in Envy. Oh hey, now they're all stacked here, that's perfect. And I think Envy, because similar reasons to Valentino, of her industries are social media and fashion. And those are two industries that heavily rely on Envy. Because like when you think about social media, it's people seeing what influencers are doing and wanting their lives to be like the influencers. That's how influencers sell their products too, is look at this person you want to be like using this product, and now you want to buy this product too, and they get a cut. And that is literally how social media works. And fashion is kind of in the same boat of there's a strong, I don't know what word I'm looking for, presence of envy in the fashion world, I guess you would say. And the beauty industry, because like we see, she has stuff for body modification, and that is all wanting your body to be different, wanting to look like someone else. I really see envy for her. And next up we have Rosie, who, we're doing the Overlords, Occam's razor approach. We're doing all the Overlord Occam's razor approach because I think she belongs in Gluttony. And obviously, I'm not saying she belongs in the ring of Gluttony because sinners can't be in any ring other than Pride. I'm putting that out there. I am saying in this tier list, she belongs in the tier of Gluttony. I mean, she's a cannibal. As soon as Charlie visits her, the first thing she does is try to feed her. Again, Occam's razor. She's Gluttony. Carmilla, okay. So if we keep going off of the approach of what they're overlords of, she is a weapons manufacturer, which really lends to wrath. And she does have a bit of a temper, as we see with Velvet's. So I think that fits. And now for the last overlord that we have on here, because we don't have Prick and Hatchet on here, and we don't really see enough of their character to judge it, I'd probably just stick them in Wrath because they're always fighting. We really know nothing about their actual characters, so I feel like that's not really enough to go off of. But we do have Zestiel, and I think I'm going to finish off this line of overlords by putting him in Sloth. And I'm not 100% on this one, but I don't really see a huge representation of any of the others, and he's retired. Like, at least right now, I feel like he represents Sloth. I don't know, like, he's the big, mysterious overlord, so I feel like saying Sloth is what got him into hell is a little anticlimactic, and I'm not sure I like that, and I'm not sure I would want that to be the case. But isn't this satisfying, though? We have an overlord for each of the sins? I kind of like that, though. And he is retired. He's not doing anything anymore. It's hard to say. He's so old. He's been in hell for so long. I can't possibly say what he was like when he was alive and human and what could have gotten him into hell. I just see him how he is now, which is very standoffish, like, I'm not getting involved. So the only thing I can see him for right now is Sloth. But we do have a former overlord here. Okay, Husk is an interesting case because we know his vices are gambling and alcoholism. And because of that, I'm going to put him in Gluttony. I hear you. Gambling, shouldn't that be greed? And maybe, depending on what drives the person to gamble. If he was gambling because he wanted money, then I would agree and say yes, greed. But it looks to me from what we've seen that he doesn't actually care about having money. He just enjoys gambling. He enjoys that gambler's high. Like we even see in Love in a Bottle, almost blinked for a second. We see in Love in a Bottle that alcoholism and gambling are like tied together for him because he falls back into both at the same time. And we see that they are linked. They are the same kind of overindulgence, which is gluttony. That's what gluttony is at its core. Gluttony isn't just about food, it's about overindulgence. And that is what we see in Husk with overindulging in alcohol and in gambling. Also, I think it's worth noting that we know that the casino that he goes to in season 2 is his casino. And in it, there are like these orange pillars that look kind of like honey and remind me of Beelzebub. So that is another thing that points me towards gluttony. Okay, Nifty is a difficult one. Like, one of the first things I think about with Nifty is how stabby she is, which points me towards wrath, right? But she's not really angry. We've never seen her get angry, so I feel like I can't put her in wrath. But what is one thing we do see from her a lot? Her being boy crazy. So I think I'm going to go with lust. Because I have not seen anything else in her. I haven't really seen her envy anyone. She's way too hyper for sloth. She doesn't seem, I mean, she has a collection, she hoards stuff, so that could be greed, but I don't really see her like being greedy. I think lust, because we do see her being boy crazy. We see her loving pain in a more lustful way. So yeah, I think that she has to be in lust. And now Pinchus. Pinchus is actually an easy one because we've seen what gets him into hell, and it is inaction, which is sloth. So that one actually is pretty easy. Which, I mean, in season 1, that's not necessarily where I would have put him. I wouldn't like look at him and see sloth. But now that we know that his inaction is what got him into hell, we know sloth is where he belongs. Cherry? She has such an explosive personality. I say explosive because, you know, she does the explosies. This is what happens when I don't script out my videos. I say things like explosives. But, she loves blowing stuff up. So I'm going to say wrath. I feel like if she lands in hell with an affinity for explosives, I'm going to assume that what got her into hell was exploding in some way. So I'm going to assume wrath. And now Angel. Angel is one that is difficult because I see so many things in him. Because obviously there's lust, there's the fact that he's a drug addict, which leads me towards gluttony. But then we found out in season 2 what sin got him in hell was killing his father, which that leads me to wrath. And since it seems like that's how he landed in hell, it seems like that wrath seems crazy for Angel. But I wouldn't have thought sloth for Pinchus in season 1. Like, we learned new things in season 2. And if the sin that got him into hell was killing his father, that seems like an act of wrath. So we're going with wrath. Baxter, I could see an argument for pride, because he is very sure of himself, sure of his own intelligence, all of that. But I'm looking at his aquatic theming, and he looks very much, he looks envying. Yeah, so I'm gonna put him, also anytime Pinchus is brought up, he gets all like jealous and grr. Like when he's like, well, we need someone in heaven with intelligence comparable to mine, and they're like, Pinchus can do it. He's like, the snake? Oh, he would. And like, he really does not like there being someone of comparable intelligence to him. He is envious of that. So with his theming and with that, I'm going to say envy. But I could see a very valid argument for pride. It's honestly the fish theming that is putting me over the edge for envy. Mimsy is easy. Mimsy is super easy. She is greed. We know this because she has a Mammon tattoo on her back. She literally is labeled with what her sin is. Case closed, don't need to do anything else. But I can, because there is more evidence. Because her whole thing in season 1 was she got in trouble with loan sharks. She owed money. She took out a loan. She owed money. So, yeah. That, the Mammon tattoo, she belongs in greed. Next on here, we have Katie Killjoy, which is going to be more difficult because we don't have a whole lot for her. But I'm going to say pride. 1, Alistair's looking a little lonely up there. And 2, she kind of has that prideful persona. She doesn't care to learn other people's names. She's just very, I'm better than you. Don't touch me. I was about to say, maybe I'm learning that I just don't like the prideful people, but then my second favorite character is Lucifer, so never mind. Never mind. And lastly, we have Tom Trench, who we have even lust to go off of. But one thing we know about him is he's horny. So I'm putting him in lust, because that is literally like the only personality trait we have of his. But what do you think? Do you agree with my placements? Let me know in the comments. Pride merch has dropped, and we have gotten some new reveals, so I thought it would be fun to go through everything with you and, overanalyze it. I do want to mention that it's really cool how all of these standees, the Hazbin and the Hellaverse, are made so that they interconnect so you can actually line them up like parade floats. And for the Hazbin one specifically, while obviously you can put them in whatever order you want, I think there is an intentional order to them. And I think it's exactly what we see here on this page, where it's heaven, then the hotel, then the Vees. And the reason I think that is because we have Pinchas looking forward, we have Cherry looking back, so obviously they would be looking at each other. And then you have Husk looking wistfully, which we'll look at these in closer detail in a minute, but you have Husk looking wistfully towards the Vees floats, which has Angel on it. And interestingly enough, Angel is not positioned next to Valentino, instead he's on the opposite end, so it seems like their priority is to keep him as distant from the hotel as possible. And also, that is literally the order that they are on the website. So I think it's pretty clear that this is the order of the floats. I want to say that right out the gate because I'm going to be talking about that some. Let's start with Heaven. Their float being a chariot is so cool. I love that. Again, the detail on these floats, I do think it's interesting that for Hellaverse, all the floats are individual apart from the couples, while in Hazbin, you have them in distinctive sets. Like, they could have done Hellaverse, like the Sins have a float, and the IMP has a float, and the Goetia have a float, but instead they did individual, while for Hazbin, it's Heaven, the hotel, and the Vees. I wonder if there's a specific reason behind that? Because the Hellaverse merch is still through Shark Robots, while the Hazbin, I think, is like through Amazon. So I wonder if there's reasoning where they had to do less for the Hazbin. I don't know. This is pure speculation. I just think it's interesting that that is different. Maybe they just had too many characters for Hazbin. Maybe they thought about grouping Hellaverse together, but the groupings didn't make as much sense because then you have like Sally Mae who wouldn't fit with IMP or anywhere. She wouldn't fit anywhere. And like Fizz, could he go on the Sins float or would he be on his own? So I can kind of see why maybe Hellaverse wouldn't work as well in the groupings now that I'm thinking more about it. That could be the reason. I don't know. I just thought it was interesting. But looking at the Heaven float, we have Pinchas looking off towards the hotel and specifically towards Cherry, and obviously we already knew that he is bi. Then we have Sarah in her awesome lesbian flag attire. She looks great. I called that Sarah was a lesbian. I am so happy. I don't know if it's just because I ship her and Carmilla, but shortly before the Pride merch dropped, I'd actually made Sarah in The Sims. And when it came to deciding her sexuality, I was like, you know what? I think she's a lesbian. I'm gonna put her a lesbian. And then we got confirmed that she is, and I'm just like, yes, called it. I'm very good at spotting lesbians because I did the same thing with Velvet. I was like, I am convinced Velvet is a lesbian, and then last year we got the confirmation of Velvet's being lesbian. So I'm very good at spotting lesbians, apparently. Emily, we don't know her sexuality, which could mean that she doesn't even know her sexuality. Like, maybe she's just still figuring that out. Or maybe Viv just wanted to leave that one up to us. And then over here, we have Adam and Abel. And, okay, there's some stuff to talk about here. It is interesting that Adam, who is dead, is here, and Lute is not. And her absence is kind of glaring. It makes me wonder, and I'm pretty sure I'm not the only person who's had this thought, if maybe she's not on the Pride float because she's homophobic. It makes a lot of sense for her character, and is kind of what I already headcanon for her. Now, I know the voice actress recently said that Lute is bi, but Alex Reitman also said that Adam is bi, and he's not. He's an ally. The things the voice actors say, while they can be super fun to run with, that's not necessarily canon, and we have to keep that in mind. But at the same time, Lute being bi doesn't necessarily mean she can't also be homophobic. Both can exist in the same person. It could be that because she's homophobic, she hasn't realized that about herself because she suppresses that part of her. Or it could be that she is on some level aware of it and hates that part of herself, and that could even lend to a big part of Luke's personality being that she needs to follow orders. Like, she started hallucinating Adam to give her orders because she couldn't make her own decisions. She needed to be told what to do. If she is bi and homophobic, that would make her question herself and her own decisions and her ability to make her own decisions. So that would actually make a lot of sense for her character. I'm not sure that's what I believe. I personally headcanon her as straight and homophobic. I'm just saying, regardless if she is homophobic, if she is bi, if something is confirmed, you can still do whatever you want. So that goes without saying. You can headcanon however you want. Viv has even said that herself. She wants us to have fun with these characters, but also to acknowledge that there is a separate canon of how they actually are. But that doesn't mean we can't do fan art, fan fiction, whatever we want. But also, if this does mean that Lute is homophobic, and you want to run with that, that also doesn't mean you can't also headcanon her as bi. That's what I'm really getting at here. But anyway, back to Adam, who actually is on the float. He is an ally, which has surprised some people. I think ally makes a lot of sense for him. I already believed he was straight. When Bretman said at a convention recently that Adam was bi, I was like, that's not my headcanon, but cool. I was like, I'm not adopting that. But it's the ally part that is really surprising a lot of people. They figured he would be more homophobic. And I think ally for Adam is a very loose definition. I see it as him basically fetishizing it. Like, we even have that moment in season 1 when Lute, talking about Charlie and Vaggie, says their love is vile and blasphemous. And Adam's response is, hot as fuck though. So we already know he kind of fetishizes it. So he would absolutely consider himself an ally because he likes to see it. Which is a very loose definition of ally, but, yeah. That is how I'm interpreting him as an ally, personally. And now for the one that has surprised most people, myself included, and that is Abel is an ally. Okay, I have to share this story. So my husband goes to work before I get up. So the day this merch dropped, I wake up to a text from my husband that's just, Abel is straight? And I texted back, I reject that. Which I say completely facetiously because I do not mind Abel being straight in canon at all. I just ship Holy Gates. And that ship's gonna live on in my heart, so. But, you know, the more I think about it, the more I actually do like Abel being straight in canon. I think it's a nice, oh, I'm missing the word, diverting of expectations, is that what I'm looking for? Something like that. It's a diversion of expectations, where you have the soft, more feminine guy, and you expect him to be gay, but he's straight. And I actually like that for representation, because it shows that even straight guys can be soft and feminine, and that's okay. There's not a problem with that. So I actually kind of love that. But I still ship him with St. Peter, so, in my heart, he is bi now. He was gay in my heart, now he is bi in my heart. Okay, moving on to the next float, we have the hotel. And, oh my, it's so cool. We have the whole hotel on the float, which is impressive. I love everyone's outfits. They all look so good. Let's start top left with Lucifer here in his pain attire, looking awesome. Not a big reveal. We don't have any reveals on this float. The big reveals were Sarah and Adam and Abel. There's still some stuff to talk about though. Like the fact that we don't have a reveal for Baxter. He is just in rainbow colors, which, like I said with Emily, could mean that he doesn't know what he is. And actually that makes a lot of sense for Baxter. He just doesn't seem to me like the type of person who spends a lot of time thinking about his sexuality. So I wouldn't actually be surprised if he doesn't know. Or it could just be that there is something in mind, Viv just didn't want to share it. That, that's going to come up as a plot point that she doesn't want to reveal yet. Or she just wants it to leave it up to us to have fun with it. Nifty, our ally, looking awesome. And Cherry looking back towards heaven. I love that. I Technically she's looking up at Nifty annoyed because Nifty is, like, bouncing off her head. But she is turned to face back towards heaven. And then, Vaggie and Charlie look so awesome. I love their ribbons making the ribbons and their hands making a heart. That is so cute, so precious. I love their outfits, especially Charlie's suit. It is so cute. And I love the way their outfits kind of complement each other. Oh, another thing to note on their float, there's lots of like bags that, because it's a hotel, so you have some luggage as the props on the floats, which is cool. And then we have Husk sitting on top of some of the luggage, looking wistfully off towards Angel on the Vees float. Very sad because we can't get Husk happy in a merch drop lately, and it's always depressing. And then we have Alistair looking awesome. I can't compliment Alistair without feeling cool. And then we have Alistair here in a very snazzy ace suit. I love his little top hats. And notably, he is also looking off towards the Vees. Probably towards one specific V. I can't be chill about this. I am freaking out over this part of the merch drop, and I'm probably overanalyzing it. But he is absolutely looking towards the V's. Looking all smug and Alistair and stuff. He's absolutely looking in Vox's direction. That's all I care about. But then over on the V's floats, Vox is definitely looking in the opposite direction. He is not looking back towards Alistair. Valentino is very specifically positioning himself between Vox and the hotel. Between Vox and Alistair. He's even like holding out his wings like he's trying to block the view. And Vox, okay, everyone's talking about Vox's expression. I love the jokes of the V's have started drugging Vox to get him to be chill and that this is his high expression. But I do not think that's what's actually happening here. Because the thing is, we've seen this face before, and I don't just mean in the Christmas merch drop where he also had this expression. I mean in the show, when they are doing the food drive, he makes this expression. This is his PR, look at me, I'm such a nice guy look, which makes sense that is what he would be doing after he nearly destroyed half the city. He would be like, look at me, I am nice. You don't have to worry about me killing everyone around. I am a nice guy, look. So I think that's what's actually going on here, not him being drugged. As hilarious as those jokes are. Velvet, always slaying with her outfits. Oh my, I always love Velvet's outfits. She looks so cute. Oh, I didn't really talk about Valentino's and Vox's outfits, but Valentino's very Valentino. I like that his wings have changed to pan colors. That is impressive. Vox's suit, I love so much. I love the little bi flag on the lapels. I love the sparkles on the sleeves. He looks great. And then we have Angel over here looking distinctly uncomfortable, which makes a lot of sense, because he is not where he wants to be. Oh, it's making me sad again. His outfit bears some similarity to what he was dressed in for the Vees press conference thing in season 2 also. Obviously, Velvet dressed him again. He looks great. He does. He's clearly uncomfortable, and I love Angel, and I feel for him, and I want to hug him. Lilith is one of the biggest mysteries in Hazbin Hotel. What's her deal? Why isn't she answering Charlie's calls? Is she evil or just misunderstood? Well, today I'm going to do a deep dive into Lilith and get to the bottom of it. First, let's start with what we know. From the way that Charlie talks about her parents, it's very clear that Lilith is the one she's always been closer to. As of season 1, Lilith has been gone for 7 years, and Charlie doesn't seem to know where she is or why. At the end of the season, it is revealed that she's in heaven, and Luge alludes to her having some kind of deal. Luge tries to order Lilith to go stop Charlie, but according to Sarah, she doesn't have that authority. Lilith has many missed calls and texts from both Charlie and Lucifer. There are resistance posters featuring Lilith that can be seen in the background as well as in the playbill, so she seems to have led some sort of movement. This is also backed up by Charlie talking about Lilith being the voice of the people. According to Vox, this movement involved an uprising against heaven, but Charlie says that is not how she remembers it. And that's it. That's really all we know about Lilith. It isn't much to go off of, and it certainly doesn't paint her in a positive light. But not everything is as it seems. Lilith could have a good reason for not being able to answer her daughter and husband's calls. For all we know, she misses them just as much as they miss her, and it pains her to ignore them. Though, according to Lucifer, she is good at that, And the way he said that, it seemed a little personal. This is a good time for me to admit that while I am trying to remain as objective as possible, I do have an internal bias against a parent who ignores their daughter's calls. So this is going to be a really hard thing for me to forgive Lilith for if she doesn't have a really good explanation. Still, I recognize that my own experiences are not necessarily what's happening here, so I will try to keep an open mind. Right now, Lilith's reason for ignoring these calls is purely speculation. We don't have a lot to go off of here. Maybe cutting off contact with her family was one of the conditions of her deal with Heaven. Maybe Lilith is simply aware that Heaven is monitoring her communication and she doesn't feel safe talking to them. Maybe she's even in some kind of trouble that she doesn't want to bring them into. Or maybe she's distanced herself from them by choice. For Charlie's sake, I really hope it's not that last one. But let's move into something that we have a little more evidence for: Lilith's resistance movement. My original theory before season 2 was that this movement was in response to the exterminations, but now we know the exterminations only started 7 years ago, around the same time Lilith disappeared. More on that later. So if it wasn't about protesting the exterminations, what was it about? We do get this description from Vox. With her song, she rallied the sinners of hell to attack Heaven in an effort to liberate us. But Vox isn't exactly a reliable source. The entire plot of season 2 was him spreading misinformation, so it makes sense that this would just be more of the same. Surely Charlie's description of events is more trustworthy. My mom never wanted violence. She empowered sinners, peaceful protest. But notably, she's the only one making that argument. No one else questions Vox's claims about something that happened only 8 years ago, and presumably most of hell would remember if they'd been led in an uprising, right? You'd think if his story was false, at least Carmilla would point that out. Or maybe Lucifer, since he would definitely know better. But Vox talked about Lilith threatening Heaven right in front of him, and he said nothing. It almost seems like hell remembers Lilith's movement the same way Vox does. In which case, maybe Charlie was sheltered from the truth, and that would explain why she has a different understanding of the events. And we do have evidence for Charlie being sheltered. According to the story of hell that she reads, Lilith thrived, empowering demonkind with her voice and songs, and as the numbers of hell grew, so did its power. Threatened by this, Heaven made a truly heartless decision. Here, the reason for the exterminations is attributed to Heaven being threatened by hell's growing numbers. But that's not the full story. Sarah tells Emily that the reason for the exterminations was because hell was uprising. Clearly, the truth of this uprising was kept from Charlie. I think it's clear that the uprising Sarah talks about and the one Vox talks about are one and the same. After all, this is the uprising that was the cause of the exterminations. The exterminations that started at the same time that Lilith disappeared. It seems that as a result of Lilith's actions, some agreement had to be reached with Heaven that involved the exterminations and Lilith leaving hell. So if both hell and Heaven seem convinced that Lilith was leading an uprising, does that settle it? Not quite. Because let's look at where Heaven got their information. When Vox threatens Heaven, Lute says to Sarah, "The threat Adam warned you about is greater than ever." Wait, Adam is their source? Adam, Lilith's ex, who hated that he couldn't control her? Adam, the embodiment of toxic masculinity, who might have felt some sort of way about seeing his ex be a strong, independent woman? Tell me it wouldn't make sense with the way this show is written and the stories it likes to tell, that Adam saw a woman, his ex, with power, and thought it looked like a threat. So he cried uprising, and of course, Heaven believed him without a second thought. Of course, this doesn't explain why Hell still seems to believe that Lilith's movement was an uprising, but what if it was somewhere in the middle? What if Lilith's protests weren't as peaceful as she told Charlie, but they also weren't a full-blown uprising? Vox could be exaggerating things for his benefit, but it's close enough to the truth that Hell's just like, yeah, that sounds right. Lilith might have even had some followers that took the movement further than she did, and that could be clouding people's memory. Our only other option is that Vox and Adam are our sources for the truth, and I don't know how I feel about that. But I'll tell you who is a good source for Hazbin Hotel content: me. So be sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out. Regardless of the nature of Lilith's movement, we have to ask the question: how does an alleged uprising end with her in Heaven? I've seen some people speculate that maybe she's a prisoner, and that occurred to me too, but there is a problem with that. When Luke confronts Lilith at the end of season 1, she says, "If you want to stay here." That doesn't sound like a prisoner if she's being incentivized to stay. When you take that into account, it looks more like Lilith agreed to stop her protests in exchange for sanctuary in Heaven. And that actually fits perfectly with Lute threatening Lilith here. She's telling her that she has to stop her daughter from causing problems like she did, threatening the very foundation of Heaven to be specific, if she wants to continue to reap the benefits for standing down. But that would mean that Lilith made the choice to walk away from her family and run away to Heaven. So does she really not care about her family in hell? She just wanted paradise? I refuse to believe it's that simple. Unfortunately, we have nothing else to go off of right now, so all we can do is make wild guesses. So let's move on to the big question. What will Lilith coming back into the picture mean for next season? Will she be an ally or a villain? Erica actually talks some about this in a recent interview.
But in season 3, I just love that, like, you see Charlie become like a little kid again. And you see her, but not in the way that we think of an excitable kid. You see her as kind of this sad girl who just wanted her mom's affection and affirmation and attention. You realize that she's doing everything to impress her mom. And she's doing everything, sometimes things that hurt other people, sometimes things that push her friends and her partner away from her, in service of getting the love that she really truly wants and needs the most, which is her mom's.
So Charlie is desperate for her mother's approval, and it sounds like that's not so easy to get. But why could that be? Well, for one, we know the main reason Charlie's running this hotel is to make her mother proud. She says as much to Vaggie and Scream Rain. And we also have reason to believe that Charlie might not have the full picture of her mother's goals. So maybe Lilith is not as enthusiastic about the hotel as Charlie had hoped. I can just imagine her completely changing the way she runs the hotel in an attempt to make her mother proud, which would play into what Erica said about Charlie trying to get her approval at the expense of Vaggie and her friends. Throughout season 3, I predict that Charlie will have to decide if she wants to run the hotel for her mom or for herself. And the arc will culminate in her finding her own purpose outside of Lilith. So this does make Lilith a bit of an antagonist, but not necessarily a full-on villain. But that's what her dynamic will be like with Charlie. What about with Lucifer? We know very little of what their relationship will be like. We know that Lucifer misses her dearly and has remained loyal to her.
Not to kink shame, but you know, I am married. Still, I think.
Love how this implies that if he wasn't married, he would go for Vox. Anyway, we also know that Lilith hasn't been answering his calls, which, as we already discussed, there could be a reason for it, and that she's not wearing a wedding ring. There's also Lucifer's response to Charlie's anger, which I've seen many people point out is the kind of reaction you would expect from someone who has a history of being abused. Now, I don't think this is enough to say that Lucifer has definitively been abused by Lilith, but I do think it is something to consider. I think it's safe to say that these two at least will have a rough reunion. But to determine where it's going, I think we need to look at one more thing. I find it very interesting that in Charlie's voicemail to Lilith, she felt compelled to say, "He's not that bad," as though trying to convince her. She even goes on to say, "He misses you," like she's backing up her claim with evidence. The fact that Charlie says this at all means that she has at very least complained to Lilith about her father. But the fact that she's actively trying to convince Lilith that he's not that bad means that Lilith either agreed with her or joined in. Either way isn't great, really. Unless your child's other parent really is that terrible, you shouldn't be bad-mouthing them or even agreeing with bad-mouthing them in front of them, because that is absolutely going to drive a wedge between them. And frankly, Lilith doesn't strike me as the passive type, so I really don't think she was just agreeing with Charlie. Intentionally or not, Lilith has driven a wedge between Charlie and Lucifer, and we see the results of that in season 1. Charlie was reluctant to call Lucifer because they've never been close. She says he only calls when he's bored or when he needs something. In juxtaposition, when Charlie calls Lucifer, he gets really excited and says she hasn't called him in years. It looks like Lucifer really wants a relationship with his daughter, but doesn't want to be pushy about it. Meanwhile, Charlie is under the impression that he doesn't want to be in her life. I'm not saying Lucifer has been the perfect father, but he showed up when she asked for him. And believe me when I say that is a testament to the kind of father he is. And now I think it would be poetic that since Charlie thought well of her father and poorly of her mother, that she ends up wrong on both counts. It would be a really great parallel with how Charlie's expectations of Lucifer ended up being defied, to have the same thing happen with Lilith, but in reverse. And that, more than anything, is what makes me lean towards Lilith being more on the villain side. Now, I'm not saying that Lilith will be pure evil. Pure evil villains have their place, but a complicated villain is often more fun. I'm proposing a villain who loves hell so much she will do anything for it. If people get hurt along the way, that's okay because it's for the greater good. I saw someone say that Lilith will hurt her family to protect them, and I agree with that sentiment completely. She may be a villain because of the line she's willing to cross and the collateral damage she leaves behind, but her heart is in the right place. Does that make her evil? I think that will depend on how far she's willing to go. And that we won't know until next season. Hazbin Hotel and Hellaverse take place in a really fun world created by Vivian Medrano. But how well do you know the world where these stories take place? Today I'm going to break down the lore of the Hellaverse so that by the end of this video you know everything you need to know about how the world works. I do mean everything. Let's start with what we know of the history of hell. The story of hell states that when the fruit of knowledge was given to Eve, for with a single act of disobedience, evil finally found its way into earth, with it a new realm of darkness and sin. This new realm, of course, being hell. It even goes on to say that heaven cast Lucifer and his love into the dark pit he had created. Now, in Hellaverse, Satan says that he's ruled hell since even before Lucifer's fall. But if you notice when he says that, Asmodeus and Beelzebub give a skeptical look back toward Lucifer's throne. And Viv did confirm on Twitter after this episode that Satan was lying. So we know that hell came into existence when Eve ate of the fruit of knowledge and that Lucifer was immediately cast down to rule over it. Hell is home to both Hellborn, the species that are native to hell, and sinners, souls who were once human but died and came to hell. Hell also has its own plant and animal life that is different from that of Earth. Some of the animals we've seen are hell pigs, horses, and queeves, which are small dog-like things. It is possible that Vox's sharks are also a hell species, but they also could have been biomechanically engineered by Baxter, and I absolutely think that's the case for Shockwave at least. Speaking of, the Egg Boys were also artificially made, as were Razzle and Dazzle, though they were made by Lucifer magically. It is unclear whether or not Kiki was also magically made, but it would make sense considering she's not just a cat, but also the key to the hotel. Another fun fact about hell is that there's different kinds of weather, like acid rain and scream rain. We also know that hell exists on the same plane of existence as heaven can be seen from hell's sky, and Vox even blasted it with the might of Lilith. There is a second shape in hell's sky that we don't know what it is, but my personal headcanon is that it's purgatory, since that would make sense to also exist on the same plane. The only other notable event that we know of in hell's history is that 7 years before the start of season 1, yearly exterminations began, where exorcists came down from heaven to kill off sinners. Demons who are native to hell are not allowed to be targeted in these. The reason for these exterminations was overpopulation, but not in the sense that there were too many people for the space. The story of hell says that, as the numbers of hell grew, so did its power. Threatened by this, heaven made a truly heartless decision. More souls means more power, and heaven didn't want hell gaining enough power to uprise against them, which Sarah was told that they were doing. So exterminations were implemented to keep hell's numbers and their power in check. Hell itself consists of 7 layers, which we can see a depiction of in Lucifer's office. This seems to be hell's equivalent of a globe. Each layer corresponds to one of the sins and has its own unique design. For every layer, the color of the sky is the same as the color that represents it on the globe. The topmost layer, represented by the red ring, is pride. It is the most diverse, with mostly urban areas, but mountains and cliffs can be seen on the outskirts of the cities. Pride consists of 9 cities, referred to as the 9 rings of hell, a reference to Dante's Inferno. The only cities that we know of are Pentagram City, sometimes just referred to as the Pentagram, where all of Hazbin Hotel takes place, and Imp City, where IMP is based out of. Pentagram City consists of 5 districts, laid out, fittingly, like a pentagram. The Entertainment District, which contains V Tower as well as many clubs. The Industrial or Weapons District, where Carmine Industries is located. Cannibal Town. The Doomsday District, which seems to be in a constant state of turf wars. And the district where the Hazbin Hotel is located. All of it is arranged around Heaven's Embassy in the center. The second orange ring of the globe is Wrath. It has a sort of western vibe to it and appears to be mostly farmland. The yellow ring is Gluttony. It mostly consists of forests, and its sky has a hexagonal pattern, which makes it look like a beehive. The green ring is Greed. It is an industrial area consisting of lots of factories and notable pollution. The blue ring is Lust. It has a big city feel to it, and I think probably draws its inspiration from Vegas. The purple ring is Envy. This ring we haven't seen yet, but since its residents seem to be aquatic, I'm guessing it will be very ocean-based. The pink ring is Sloth. It is a bit of a dreamscape with islands floating in the sky, some of which even have waterfalls pouring off of them. It is also where Hell's hospitals and clinics seem to be located. All of the layers are connected by an elevator that Hell's residents can use to travel between them. The exception is Sinners. They are contained to the Pride Ring and are physically unable to travel to the other layers. Speaking of sinners, let's get into the residents of Hell. Lucifer, as you might guess, is the most powerful being in Hell and rules over it. He was a seraphim angel before he was cast down, and now he is the devil and the sin of pride, and as such, he is based in the Pride Ring. While he is the most powerful, Hell is still meant to be a punishment for him, so he is constantly surrounded by sinners, a reminder of his biggest mistake, and he is unable to harm them. Between you and me, I think this is why sinners are confined to the Pride Ring, so that Lucifer is guaranteed to be constantly surrounded by the consequences of letting sin into the world. The next most powerful is the rest of the royal family, Charlie and Lilith. Lilith is obviously Lucifer's currently estranged wife, who has been around since the beginning of Hell. Charlie is their daughter and is around 200 years old, but at the rate at which she ages, that is the equivalent to 20-ish. Personally, I think that when Charlie comes into her power, she will be more powerful than Lilith, but that's just speculation on my part. Speaking of speculation and Lilith, a common part of her mythos is that because she was disobedient to Adam, all of her children are stillborn. It is unknown if Viv is pulling from this part of her mythos, But if she is, that begs the question of how Charlie came to be. The next on the power scale is the rest of the deadly sins. The sin of wrath is Satan, the sin of gluttony is Beelzebub, the sin of greed is Mammon, the sin of lust is Asmodeus, the sin of envy is Leviathan, and the sin of sloth is Belphegor. We don't know how they all compare to each other in regards to power, but we do know that Crimson referred to Asmodeus as the weakest of the sins. Whether or not that's true remains to be seen. We also don't know where the rest of the sins originated. My personal headcanon is that they were angels who followed Lucifer in the fall, but they just as easily could have come into existence with hell. One fun fact that we do know is that they used to have a circus troupe with Lucifer. Next on the power scale are the Ars Goetia. Every sin has their own demons that they created, and the Ars Goetia are Lucifer's. They're all bird-like, and when you look at the bird-like features of some of the higher angels, like the Speaker of God, it's easy to see where Lucifer got his inspiration from. The Ars Goetia are demonic royalty with kings, princes, and marquises that we've seen. But according to the mythos that the Goetia come from, there are also dukes, earls, knights, and presidents, with 72 in total. The ones we know of are King Paimon, his son, Prince Stolas, Stolas' wife, Stella, who does not have a ranking and is not listed among the 72, their daughter Octavia, who is Stolas' heir and also isn't listed in the mythos, Stella's brother, Marquis Androlphus, and lastly, Prince Visago. As Lucifer's creation, the Ars Goetia at least mostly reside in the Pride Ring. It is unknown where exactly in Pride they live, but I think it's safe to assume that they probably have their own city or two. The next most powerful in Hell are Overlords. These are sinners who gain power through owning souls. We know that Alistair was the most powerful before Vox overtook him, but given that Vox's power seems to rely on his rankings, and his rankings plummeted at the end of the season, I think it's safe to assume that Alistair's once again the strongest. The other overlords we know of are Zestial, Rosie, Carmilla, Zizi, Maestro, Valentino, Velvet, Prick, and Hatchet. Zestial is the oldest and presumably one of the strongest, though he is currently retired. And Prick and Hatchet seem to be the weakest since they weren't invited to the meeting in season 1. Overlords all have special abilities and a more demonic form, such as Vox has hypnotism, cables, can produce holograms and interface with electronics, can change his voice, and can travel through and produce electricity. He can also transform into this large virus creature. The next up in the power rankings is the average sinner. Sinners can take on many different kinds of form in Hell, usually tied to either how they died or how they lived in life. For example, Vox died by a TV falling on his head, so now he has a TV for a head. Meanwhile, Angel and his family were mafia, a web of crime, so to speak, so they are all spiders. Sinners' forms also serve to torture them in some way, often by reminding them of something they'd rather not think about. We see this in Alistair being a deer to mock him for how he died. As sinners are already dead, they can't be killed except for by angelic weaponry. If they die, they will just respawn. Though we don't know if being killed will cause them to lose any power that they've gained. I think it would be really interesting if an overlord was killed, they lose all their souls and respawn as an average sinner. But they could just as easily maintain their power, we don't know for sure. Sinners are also unable to reproduce. Again, likely because they are dead. They're also different from Hell's natives in that their blood is red instead of black. I'm not going to list every sinner we know because it is almost the whole cast of Hazbin Hotel and all of IMP's clients. So, after sinners in the rankings are Hellborn species. As I mentioned with the Ars Goetia, every sin has a kind of demon that they created, and most of them fall into this category. As you'll see with most of them, their designs bear similarities to the sin who created them. It is likely that the majority of them will reside in the layer of Hell in which they originated, but they can also move elsewhere. So Belphegor has Baphomets. These are goat-like demons with a candle on their head. We've seen some working in the hospitals of Sloth, and they've also been in the background elsewhere. Leviathan has aquatic demons. Glitz and Glam are the main ones that we know about. There's also Rolando, who was identified as an infestor demon. It is unknown if infestor is what all of Leviathan's demons are called, or if that's a particular subset. Asmodeus has succubi. They are pink-skinned demons with horns and wings and are masters of seduction. The most notable succubi that we know of is Vraska Mayday. Mammon has reptilian and shark demons. While his demons are varied in appearance, they are all identifiable from the rings in their eyes. It is also possible for Hellborn to be a cross between multiple species. An example of this is Striker, who has reptilian qualities and has rings in his eyes, indicative of a native of greed, but he is also part imp. Speaking of, the lowest on Hell's power scale are imps and Hellhounds. Hellhounds are Beelzebub's demons. They are easily identifiable because they're, well, dogs. Obviously, this includes Luna and her friends, as well as Vortex. Lastly, we have imps, which are Satan's demons. They're small and red with horns and a tail. They are considered the lowest of Hell's hierarchy, with low-end jobs like retail and food service. Blitz, Moxie, and Millie are all imps, as are their families. Also, in the interest of being thorough, there were also these Reaper things we saw in Mastermind. I honestly have no idea where exactly these guys fit in, except for that they clearly serve as Hell's law enforcement. For all we know, they were just created to carry out that job and aren't actually functional members members of society. But speaking of society, let's talk a bit about Hell's culture. While more violent than Earth, Hell isn't completely lawless, and actually functions pretty similarly to Earth, with shops, schools, and emergency services. Hell has its own television channels, but also gets some channels from Heaven and Earth due to Vox pirating them. Hell has its own drugs and alcohol that are stronger than Hell's equivalent, like H8 and Beelzejuice. Human drugs are not so potent to Hellborn and are actually used as normal medicine in Sloth. Every species has a bit of their own culture. For example, imps curse using Satan's name, and they see him as kind of a godlike figure. Hell has its own languages, even though the characters are shown to speak English in the show for the sake of the viewer. It is unclear if this is also the case for sinners, or if IMP is just fluent in English. It is possible that some human languages are taught in Hell's schools so that demons can communicate with sinners. Hellborn demons celebrate Sinsmas, where they embrace their native sin. However, Stolas wasn't familiar with the holiday, so it appears not to be celebrated among royalty. It is possible that royalty celebrates Christmas instead, since Viv said that Krampus is Hell's version of Santa Claus, and his negative counterpart is the Black Hatter, who is entirely made of hats and beats demons up. Hellborn also celebrate Halloween, as it is a time where they are able to travel to Earth. There are also two ways we've seen to get to Earth year-round. Stolas' grimoire. It is unclear if every Goetia has a grimoire that will allow them to access the human world, but at the very least, Stolas does. Then there's Asmodean crystals. These are presumably made by Asmodeus, and are given to demons who need to access the living world to do their jobs. These demons do have additional requirements, such as having a human disguise and not causing trouble on Earth that would expose the supernatural world. Now, I believe we have covered most everything in Hell, so let's move on to Heaven. We don't know quite as much about Heaven, but we do know some. I mentioned demons having either black or red blood, while angels have gold. As for the different kinds of angels, there are cherubs, which seem to be on par with Hell's imps. There's even some that have a business similar to IMP. They are small, winged angels. Presumably there are more Heavenborn above them, but we have no information on them. There are also winners, who are humans who died and went to heaven. I assume they function similarly to sinners in that they can't die or reproduce. We don't know what exorcists are, if they are winners or Heavenborn, but we do know that Adam was human before he became an archangel. However, if winners bleed red the same way that sinners do, then exorcists would have to be Heavenborn. We see various high-ranking angels attending Pinchas' trial, but we don't know what they all are. In Overture, Adam alludes to sleeping with a virtue chick, which might imply that there are 7 virtues to parallel the 7 sins. Though virtue could also just be referring to a type of angel. We know that Seraphim are among the highest-ranking angels who govern heaven, though the way Emily refers to herself as the other Seraphim makes it sound like she and Sarah are the only ones. We know that Sarah works directly under the Speaker of God, which Viv has said is the highest figure we'll see in heaven since she considers God too ethereal to depict. So here's my attempt at coming up with Heaven's hierarchy. Please note that this is not canon, it is just my best guess based on what we know, assuming Heaven's hierarchy is a direct parallel to Hell's. As for the geography of Heaven, we don't really know anything except for there are gates at the entrance and there is a cherub town. Unlike Hell, animals are like those of Earth, with the implication that animals go to heaven when they die. There's one more corner of the universe that we have yet to touch on, the embodiment of good and evil. We need to go back to the story of Hell for this. It began saying that heaven was ruled by beings of pure light, angels that worshiped good and shielded all from evil. Viv has said that the personification of good and evil here is the closest the show will have to gods. We don't know much about the personification of good other than there is this temple in heaven that appears to be dedicated to her, but we do know that the personification of evil is called the root of all evil, or Ru for short. And this is some early art that Viv has done of her. A notable feature of her design is the eyes, and something we haven't discussed yet is that there are eyes seen throughout Hell. It is a common theory among the fanbase that these eyes are tied to Ru, and that she is able to see through them. This theory was reinforced in Scream Rain when we saw one of the eyes watching Vox's exchange with Angel. Notably, there are also eyes in heaven, though they are different in appearance, so these most likely belong to the personification of good. This implies that both good and evil are able to keep a constant watch over their realms. Unfortunately, that is really all we know for now, but with the confirmation that Ru has recorded her first lines, we're going to learn more soon enough. Well, that's it for today. Until next time, stay hyper.